शनिवार का दिन और हम शुरू करेंगे चैप्टर नंबर 14। और चैप्टर नंबर 14 शुरू करने के पहले हम लोग रोज की तरह मेडिटेशन करेंगे और उसके लिए हाजिर है स्वाति मेहरा। ओवर टू यू मिसेस मेहरा।
सुप्रभात सभी को। Each time we get angry on our own selves or we berate our own selves, sometimes the inner critic comes up so strong that we question ourselves and we get angry towards ourselves. Each time we do this, we create blockages in our own energy system. So with today's meditation, we will lift up all these energies from our own psychic bodies and energy bodies. Let us get into a meditative state by invoking the blessings of the divine. I sit comfortably. Take a deep breath in and out. Close my eyes if I wish, relaxing all the muscles in and around my eyes. I relax my body by releasing any tension in any area of the body. I allow my arms to let go, loose and relaxed. Now I relax my back and my neck by relaxing the spine, releasing the muscles all the way from the head, down the neck, along each vertebrae to the base of the spine. I breathe deeply into my diaphragm, drawing air fully into the lungs, and release the air with a whooshing sound. I breathe in again, slowly, pause for a moment, and breathe out. I draw a deep breath in and out, in and out. I'm becoming more and more relaxed with each breath. I now feel a wave of relaxation flow from the soles of my feet to my ankles, legs, sacred zone, chest, back, and back of the head, top of the head, and my face. I now see myself walking. I can hear the waves. I can smell the ocean spray. The air is moist and closer to the sea, and see the brilliant aqua color of the ocean ahead. I pause here for a moment. I walk onto the long stretch of white sand. The sand is soft, and I walk towards the water. The beach is wide and long. I see the waves washing up, coming to the shore, and see towards the ocean, washing up, flowing back, washing up, flowing back. As I come close to the shore, I feel the mist from the ocean on my skin. A wave washes over the sand towards me, touching my toes before receding. I pause here for a moment, enjoying this very special moment when the water touches my feet and goes back. The sand tickles and my mood lightens. I now walk back a little, finding myself a comfortable spot, and I sit down. I am enjoying this moment of solitude, being with myself. As I feel calm settling in, I ask myself, why do I do this to me? Why do I not appreciate myself? Why is the inner critic so strong that it forces me to look at my negatives and not appreciate the positives? Am I ready to let go of this anger that I hold towards me? My inner self responds, saying, this is the moment. Now is the time. I now make an intent that I am now willing to let go of this anger, self-berating energy that may have been created, or any past residual energies now. I now call upon the divine energies to assist me through this process. Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Krishna, I call upon you to release any angry energy that is stored or creating attacks in this moment from my back, my shoulders, neck, and any other area of my body. I breathe in. I see or feel these attack forms from being lifted from different parts of my body. These forms appear like spears, arrows, knives, daggers, or any other instrument of attack. I may experience heaviness being lifted or see clouds of smoky energy. As these are floating and being removed from my back and body, I may get thoughts and memories about when I did this to myself. I completely trust and allow the divine to lift these energies from the field. As I receive thoughts and memories, I am kind and towards myself. Instead, I will create more attack energy for myself and create an unbreakable loop. In this moment now, I send golden pink light to all those comments and moments which are flashing before me and release it to the divine. I continue to take a few more deep breaths and I feel more and lighter. I now see a beam of powerful healing, emerald green light in all the places where I felt attacked. This light is now restoring my energies and body to its true state of natural wholeness. I am now wrapped in a purple light which creates an additional field of protection. I am now clear and whole, and I now invoke the divine and request him to assist me with loving thoughts about myself. Krishna, 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 Krishna. And I feel myself being wrapped in a dark pink light. In this space for a few moments. Letting go of images, if any, coming back to the here and now, rubbing my palms, putting them on my eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Coming back, calmer, lighter, happier. Welcome back.
Tara, good morning, Shubhodaya. Swati, thank you very much again for that divine experience that all of us have been through.
Thank you, Ram.
We pray with a prayer to Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Please be with us, Krishna, and bless us. Continue this journey. You have blessed us all with. So, welcome back to this session. If you recall, yesterday I did mention to you that from chapter 13 onwards, we're going to be challenged, and this particular chapter number 14, continues in that same vein, trying to figure out how our own conditioning will get addressed, and how are we going to make sure that whatever are the issues that are there in our mind will get addressed and resolved. So let's begin this particular journey. Chapter 14 is in many ways also known as the Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga, which means the interplay of the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. We were very briefly introduced to them in earlier chapters, but this is the chapter in which he explains it to us in greater detail as to what is Sattva, what is Rajas, and what is Tamas. How do we recognize it? In what ways does it manifest itself? How does it really work for us? Of course, much later in chapter 17, he gets into very many details about these gunas. So some of that will get explained today, and some of that will get done when we ultimately get to chapter 17. So in the last chapter, if you recall, we were explained about Prakriti, nature, and Purusha, and Purusha being the Supreme Lord, and about Kshetra and the Kshetragna, the body and the knower of the body. Okay, how do we actually distinguish that? So here we go deeper into nature and find out how this entire issue of nature and its interplay with the body, the guna, through the gunas, are going to impact us. So, again, going back to our friend Arjuna and his conditioning. So he is now, if you recall in earlier chapters, whenever Krishna starts, the beauty of the Gita is that in some chapters, Krishna starts off on his own. And in some chapters, Arjuna asks a question and then Krishna answers those questions. So there's a very interesting thought process there, where, Krishna leaves Arjuna with a thought, and then Arjuna naturally asks that thought to Krishna saying, hey, 1 minute, what is this? Okay. And then Krishna answers that. And in some chapters, Krishna actually starts off on his own as continuation of the earlier chapter. This is one of those kinds of chapters. But if you recall, one of the interesting things that I pointed out, that sometimes when Krishna starts off on his own, he tells Arjuna that, look, because I like you, I'm going to be doing this because you're my beloved, or because you're a very attentive person, or because you're free from envy, I'm explaining this to you. Now, Arjuna's conditioning is kind of complete at this point of time, and he is ready. And therefore, Krishna just picks up this chapter and explains to him and says, I will now explain to you the most supreme of all wisdoms, because based on this Gnana and Vijnana, you will actually be able to attain a much, much higher state in your life, right? So, Srini, if you can help us with verse 1.
श्री भगवान ने कहा, समस्त ज्ञानों में उत्तम परम ज्ञान को मैं पुनः कहूंगा, जिसको जानकर सभी मुनिजन इस लोक से जाकर परम सिद्धि को प्राप्त हुए हैं.
So what is he doing to Arjuna and to us? He's saying that, look, now you guys have evolved. If you remember, I said, look, the 13 chapters are over. There is a certain thought process now that has, that you have received. And because of that entire thought process, you are now ready to receive that particular wisdom by which you will attain that supreme siddha, okay, that state of being in the highest plane. So what he talks about is this, that he says that, look, in verse 2, 3, and 4, he says that, look, this wisdom will help you to attain me. Okay? And therefore, they escape the cycle of birth and death. If you remember in chapter 8, verse 17, 18, 19, he talks about how at the end of the yuga, all of us will dissolve and how all of us will get a new creation. But he says even that is something that you will escape if you understand this supreme knowledge and this supreme thought process. So, what he says something very interesting. He says Prakriti, which is nature, okay, is a manifestation. I mean, it takes the form of my womb, and I am the person who actually impregnates that womb with my seed. If you recall in the earlier chapters, he did make this mention that in each one of us, there is this supreme divinity that is embedded within each one of us. And therefore, he is reiterating this point to Arjuna and through him to us, saying that, look, it is this supreme divinity in the form of nature. This supreme divinity actually takes the form of the seed, which embeds itself in the womb, which is nature. And from that, all beings are born. So, nature, which is Prakriti, okay, and Purusha, here is the way that, they both come up. I think Renu asked this question yesterday about is it also one way of looking at it is the Ardhanarishwar? Absolutely, Renu. This is the answer that we were looking for. That, look, Prakriti is nature, and in that particular nature, it is this Purusha, the Supreme Lord, that actually puts his seed in, and from that, all of us beings are actually born. And this is something which is very, very important for us to understand, that, look, while what happens in nature, what happens in Prakriti, and the way we interact with that Prakriti, but more importantly, with each of us, there is that innate divinity that is there, because it is that Purushottama that has put that particular seed in that Prakriti, and that is his whole point to Arjuna. He says that, look, this is the wisdom that you need to understand, Arjuna, that I am within you, okay? In every human being that is born, there is a certain manifestation of the higher Lord. And this is the supreme wisdom that he is talking to us about, saying that recognize that divinity within you. Even if you have not been able to do it to date, it's perfectly all right. But it is high time that you recognize that divinity that is there innate in each one of us, because I am there, and this is that supreme wisdom that Krishna passes on to Arjuna right at the beginning of this chapter. He says, this is the Uttamam, this is the ultimate knowledge that you need to understand, that you have everything within you that you need to become successful in life. And that is the explanation that he is giving us from verse 1 to verse 5. And then he goes on from verse 5 to 19, and we will do that in greater detail as to what are the three gunas and how do these gunas manifest themselves from nature in us. So remember this very important thing. In the Bhagavatam, as I told you, in the beginning there was complete equilibrium. It is only when this interplay, when this gunas became imbalanced, did mankind come. That is the statement that we've been given. And now we're being told very clearly that, look, whatever it is that we are part of, we are part of that divinity, but then we need to understand how these three gunas that emanate from nature will either help us or will hold us back. If you recall, in the last chapter, we did a lot of talk about the 31 enabling thoughts that he is giving us. Now he's saying, look, be careful, watch out, that these are the kind of gunas that will come within each one of us. There is a particular thought process that says that, look, either you are of sattva guna or rajaguna or tamoguna. But my thinking is that within each one of us, all three gunas are there. It is what we bring to the fore at what point of time, in what transaction, will determine how we are going to be reacting. So look at these gunas from the point of saying that, look, all of them are within me, but I now need to figure out which is the one that I should bring into play and at what point of time. So let's pick up stanza number 5 and see what is the meaning that he gives to each of these three gunas and how does it make sense to each one of us where we are.
Tvam rajastama iti guna prakriti sambhava vadnanti mahabaho dehi namo vyayam.
हे महाबाहो, सत, रज और तम ये प्रकृति से उत्पन्न तीन देह के साथ
right? This is saying that he is now going to take us, now that he's explained to us the supreme wisdom, that in each one of us there is this ultimate divinity that is there. Now it is important for us to understand that because we are born out of nature, this will be there. Okay? All the energy will come from these three gunas. So what does he say? He says sattva, rajas, and tamas. What is sattva? Sattva is attentiveness, of being aware. That is our definition of sattva. Rajas is a desire for activity. And tamas, which is inattentiveness or ignorance. These are the three gunas, and it is their interplay that the wearer of the body is bound by the Supreme Being. So while this Supreme Being is innate in us, the wearer of the body is somebody who's interacting with the rest of the world, and it is these three things, which is attentiveness of being aware, a desire for activity, which is rajas, and inattentiveness or tamas, which is ignorance. These are the three that come into interplay and figure out how the body is going to interact with the Supreme Being that is there within each one of us. So he is now taking us into the whole journey, saying, how are you going to now figure out a way of allowing, you see, taking your body, if you recall till now we said, it is this human body that interacts with the objects of the senses which are outside. Now he's saying, how are you going to turn it inward, and how are you going to start working with the supreme imperishable soul, that supreme Jivatma that is there within you, that supreme Purushottama that is there within each one of us. So we will examine each of these one by one. Yeah, Srini, verse number 6, please. Yeah.
तत्र सत्त्वं निर्मलत्वात् प्रकाशकमनामयम् सुखसङ्गेन बध्नाति ज्ञानसङ्गेन चानघ.
Right. Anurag?
हे पाप रहित अर्जुन, उन गुणों में सत्व गुण निर्मल अर्थात स्वच्छ होने के कारण प्रकाशक और निर्विकार है। वह जीव को सुख की आसक्ति से और ज्ञान की आसक्ति से बांध देता है।
Right? So he is explaining to us the first one, which is sattva. Now it's important for us to understand this. Okay? When we call sattva this whole issue of being aware, of being attentive, okay? What does it do? Sattva, he says, is pure illumination, and it is free from any kind of an evil. And this is something that binds us in an attachment to happiness. It binds us in an attachment to knowledge or wisdom. Okay? So sattva is pure goodness. Okay? And it is illuminating well-being. It is not at all something just to do with evil. But this is something also that creates a certain amount of attachment, and it creates an attachment to happiness or to knowledge. So that aspect of yours, when it deals with the outer world, by which you are going to be getting happiness and knowledge, remember, that is the sattva part of you, that is the sattva guna in you that is coming to the fore. We go to verse 7.
रजोरागात्मकं विद्धि तृष्णासङ्गसमुद्भवम् तन्निबध्नाति कौन्तेय कर्मसङ्गेन देहिनम्.
हे कुंती नंदन, तृष्णा और आसक्ति को पैदा करने वाले रजोगुण को तुम राग स्वरूप समझो। वह कर्मों की आसक्ति से देही आत्मा को बांधता है।
Right? So he goes on to say that, look, rajas is from the nature of passion. If sattva was pure, it was pure, it was attentiveness, it was being aware, then rajas is in the nature of passion. And it is this that gives rise to desire and attachment, and hence it binds us in an attachment to action and to the fruits of our action. So very clearly there are these two things. So in the day, whenever you're doing something, by which when you interact with the rest of the world, if it is coming from a system of desire, or if it is coming from any attachment that comes, then remember it is that rajas that is in play at that point of time. Yashini. Let's look at tamas.
तमस्त्वज्ञानजं विद्धि मोहनं सर्वदेहिनां प्रमादालस्य निद्राभिः तन्निबध्नाति भारत.
हे भरतवंशी अर्जुन, संपूर्ण देहधारियों को मोहित करने वाले तमोगुण को तुम अज्ञान से उत्पन्न होने वाला समझो। वह प्रमाद, आलस्य और निद्रा के द्वारा देहधारियों को बांधता है।
Okay, so he is now explaining to us about the tamoguna, the tamas. Okay, he says tamas is born out of lack of wisdom or ignorance, and therefore it binds us to negligence, it binds us to laziness, it binds us to a lack of awareness and even excessive sleep. So this is the one that binds us to inaction. So we've been very clearly identified that there are these three gunas: sattva, which is pure illumination; rajas, which is in the nature of passion; and tamas, which is in the form of ignorance. Okay, let's go to verse number 9, Srini.
त्वं सुखे संजयति रजः कर्मणि भारत ज्ञानमावृत्य तु तमः प्रमादे संजयत्युत.
Right.
हे अर्जुन, सत्व गुण सुख में और रजोगुण कर्म में लगाकर मनुष्य पर विजय करता है, किंतु तमोगुण ज्ञान को आवृत करके जीव को प्रमाद से युक्त कर देता है.
All right. So this is what his point is. Okay. So he is now kind of tying it up. Okay. So what does he say? He says that look, sattva is what binds you to the attachment, binds us in attachment to happiness. Because that is what sattva does. Okay. Happiness, pleasure, this is what sattva does to us. Whereas rajas binds us to attachment to action. And tamas, by lack of wisdom, it binds us to ignorance and laziness. Okay, so there are these three things that really happen to all of us. Now he goes on in verse 10 to explain something very important. He says that when sattva is prevalent a lot more, it obviously overpowers rajas and tamas. But when rajas is very prominent in us, then it overpowers sattva and tamas. And when tamas is very powerful in us, then it overpowers sattva and rajas. So the whole point is this, that we need to understand this, that in a day, all these three gunas, they will be an interplay. Whenever you're going to get into any kind of a transaction in a day, you will have all these three at work. You will have sattva, you will have rajas, you will have tamas at play. Okay, and we move, very effortlessly between the three. What we need to do is to watch out, saying which is this that is actually coming out. Okay, so let me give you an example of what I'm saying. The point is that in a day, for instance, when you get up in the morning and you do your bath and then you do your puja or you do your morning rituals, that is the time when everything is in a sattva kind of a state of mind. When you get to work, there is a lot of activity which is going on, and you're driving results, you're getting your people to work, you're doing things. All of that is when your rajaguna is absolutely predominant. And when you get back home in the evening and you want to relax at that time, you want to just chill out, and you say, look, I don't want to do anything at all. That's the so the point is that when in the morning when you get up, at that time, if you allow rajas or tamas to take over, then obviously the feeling of sattva will come down. And likewise in the office, when you're supposed to be doing some work or when you're supposed to be getting and doing what you want to do, if you allow tamas to take place, then obviously you're not going to get the kind of results that you want. And likewise, when you're in the evening, when you want to just relax, and that is the time when you don't want any other guna to come. So it is very important to remember that during the day, all of us will experience all these three gunas. It is not that, I am sattva, somebody is rajas and somebody is tamas. No. In each one of us, it is these three gunas that will play with nature, will play with what is outside of our system. So that is something that we need to keep in mind all the time. Now let's understand this a little more, and let's pick up verse number 11, 12, and 13. I think we have them together with you, because this will give us to understand how these three gunas will interact with the mind. Okay, and we'll just look at that. Yes, Srini. I think you need to play all three together, Srini.
रजस्तमश्चा विभूय सत्वं भवति भारत रजसत्वं तमश्चैव तमसत्वं रजस्तथा सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन् प्रकाश उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा विद्यात् विवृद्धं सत्त्वमित्युत प्रवृत्तिरारम्भः कर्मणामशमस्पृहा रजस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे भरतर्षभ प्रकाशो प्रवृत्तिश्च प्रमादो मोह एव च तमस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे कुरु नन्दन.
See? Anurag, the next slide, yeah.
जब इस देह के द्वारा समस्त इंद्रियों में प्रकाश उत्पन्न होता है, तब जानना चाहिए कि सत्व गुण बढ़ा हुआ है। हे भरत श्रेष्ठ, रजोगुण के बढ़ने पर लोभ प्रवृत्ति, कर्मों का आरंभ, अशांति और स्पृह, ये प्रवृत्तियां पैदा होती हैं। हे कुरुनंदन, तमोगुण के प्रवृद्ध होने पर अप्रकाश, अप्रवृत्ति, प्रमाद और मोह, ये सब उत्पन्न होते हैं।
Right. Okay. So his whole point is this, that when sattva is uppermost, when the light of wisdom shines through all our sense organs and influences the mind. So these three verses about how these gunas influence the mind. So this whole thing is, you can actually do a very interesting tabular column and figure out how do these three things come, and we'll do that in just a minute. So he says sattva is uppermost when the light of wisdom is influencing your mind and therefore actions that you perform. This is uppermost when restlessness, okay, this constant being in activity, when that prevails and influences your mind. Whereas when tamas is uppermost in your mind, when darkness, delusion, ignorance, inactivity prevail and influence the mind. So if you're going to be procrastinating during the day, obviously that is the time when tamoguna is absolutely prevalent. When you are in this frantic activity mode, that is when rajas is prevalent in the mind. And sattva is when you're able to think calmly and when you're able to take those decisions that you need to take with calmness. So what he is trying to tell us is this, that recognize what is it that is figuring out in your mind and what is it that is influencing you now in terms of the activity that you need to perform. Are you able to take those decisions with a certain amount of calmness? Are you able to take those decisions with, weighing all these factors in? And that means that at that point of time, it is the sattva guna in you that is helping you to sit back, to strategize, to think through, and then take that call that you need to take. If there is frantic activity and you're just caught up in the activity just to do that particular activity at that point of time, and your mind is saying, come on, do something, do it now. That is the time you need to realize that is coming, and is coming from a rajas perspective, because what rajas does is that it gets you to get into an area of desire, it gets you into an area of greed, it gets you into an area where you get more attached to the manifestations of the outcome or even the outcomes itself. Whereas if in the day you are procrastinating and you're not doing what you need to be doing, then during that time, understand that it is tamas, which is ignorance, which is darkness, which is delusion that is coming in and working on your mind. So here is a beautiful path that is laid out to us, that when you're doing something, when you're performing your action, what is it that is helping you to, what is it that is driving, what is that thought that is driving that action is something that we need to be aware of. So when you need to go and do stuff, at that time, don't be calm. It's not required. When you need to react to someone, it is better to be responsive. At that time, it is better to be tamas. So it is all these three gunas that will come in our way when we are acting on, when we are getting into some kind of action in life. And this is something that we need to be aware of. Okay. He goes on in verse 14 and 15 to educate us, saying, if the body meets death when sattva is predominant, then it attains to the world, which is very high. Whereas if the body meets death when rajas is predominant, then obviously he is going to be born again amongst people who are attached to work. And when tamas is predominant, at that time, you're going to get to a situation where you're going to be reborn in the wombs of the foolish. What does this mean? That at any point of time, what we are doing right now, if you remember, we examined this some time back, saying, live as if you're going to die the next moment. And if that is going to happen to you, then whatever you're going to be doing at that time is what you will get your rebirth in. That is something that will influence the way you're going to be born once again in this world. Keep that in mind. And then he goes on to talk to us as to what are the kinds of fruits that you will get from the action that you perform. Okay, is it all the same, or is there a difference in the kind of fruits that you will get? So Srini, with your help, can we pick up slide number 16? Yeah.
कर्मणः सुकृतस्याहुः सात्विकं निर्मलं फलम् रजसस्तु फलं दुःखम् अज्ञानं तमसः फलम्।
शुभ कर्म का फल सात्विक और निर्मल कहा गया है। रजोगुण का फल दुख और तमोगुण का फल अज्ञान है।
Okay, so he's now taking us into what can be the fruits of our action. You know, somebody asked this question some time back. So does it mean that there will be no fruits? No, there will be fruits of your action, 100%. Okay, so if you recall, we said there is an action, there will be an outcome, there are these manifestations of the outcome, and then each of those outcomes will get into a certain kind of a result. So he's very clearly defining to us, saying that, look, if the fruit, if it is from a sattva kind of an activity, if the mindset that you're going to be coming up with is from sattva, then obviously the fruits that you're going to get are going to be pure and good. If the activity is, if the mindset that is driving the activity is from a rajaguna, then obviously you're going to you may get a lot of pain, because what you're doing at that time, that mindset is coming from a situation of desire or greed, and therefore you may set yourself up into not obtaining what you want, and therefore that could lead you to certain amount of grief or certain amount of pain. And however, he very clearly explains that, look, when that set is, the tamas is uppermost, okay, then you will not get any, obviously when you're going to be driven into inactivity, then you're not going to get any kind of a result whatsoever, and therefore it is going to be darkness. We go on in verse 17, he explains this, he kind of clarifies this a little more. Srini?
तत्त्वात् संजायते ज्ञानम् रजसो लोभ एव च प्रमादमोहौ तमसः भवतो ज्ञानमेव च।
सत्व गुण से ज्ञान उत्पन्न होता है, रजोगुण से लोभ तथा तमोगुण से प्रमाद, मोह और अज्ञान उत्पन्न होता है।
Right? So he goes on to explain that a little more in detail, and Krishna is telling us that, look, sattva obviously results in knowledge, which is what you want, knowledge and the wisdom that you need. Rajogun, obviously, because it arises from greed, Rajogun is going to give you only greed, and Tamoguna will result in ignorance. So remember one very important point, okay? In verse 19 and 20, he goes on to explain this, that look, when whatever activity that you do, make sure that you are aware of the fact that it is these three that are driving your mindset at that point of time. So when you actually think about it and say that, look, it is this gunas within me that is driving me to do what I'm doing right now. And that is therefore the kind of results that I'm getting. That is the kind of stuff that I'm getting from this whole thing. So if you can transcend that interplay and do what is supposed to be done at the right time with the right mindset, then obviously you're well on your way to achieving your swadharma. So he's giving us lots and lots of examples. So if you really do a recap of all this, in verse 4, he's very clearly telling us that, look, the origin of all these three gunas is nature. It isn't prakriti. Whereas in verse 5, he's very clearly saying that sattva is very luminous, is kind of stainless, okay? Whereas rajas is passion and tamas deludes us. He goes on to say that, look, the source of sattva is pure. The source of rajas is desire and attachment, whereas the source of tamas is ignorance. Then he goes on to talk about how it binds us to attachment. Okay, how does it bind us? in verse 6, 7, 8, he says, Sattva will bind you to happiness and pleasure and wisdom and knowledge. Whereas Rajas will bind you into action and you will get into ceaseless work. Whereas Tamas will bind you into inactivity, laziness, and sleep. Then he goes on to explain to us that what is the manifestations? So when Sattva is uppermost, then it obviously overpowers Rajas and Tamas. But when Rajas is high, it overpowers Sattva and Tamas. When Tamas is very high, it overpowers Sattva and Rajas. Okay? So watch out and decide what do you want to bring in at what point of time when you want to take your calls and decisions in life. And he says, finally, when the body is interacting with the outer world, okay, and the sense organs open up to the light of knowledge, to the light of wisdom, then remember that is the call that you're taking from a Sattva perspective. Whereas if those calls you're taking is purely from a greed, desire, restlessness, work, kind of a perspective, then it is your Rajas that is at work. And when you are actually looking at it in terms of inactivity, in terms of delusion, in terms of ignorance, then obviously it is Tamas. And then he talks about it that if you do this at the time of birth, that means at the time of death, okay, if Sattva is predominant, then obviously you're going to attain to pure spheres. Whereas if it is Rajas or Tamas, then you're going to be reborn in the wombs of people who are attached to work or ignorance. And the results that you get of the action that you take from Sattva is pure, is desirable, is what you want, is part of your Swadharma. Whereas from Rajas, you're setting yourself up for some pain and disappointment because you may not get what you want when you're operating from a Rajas perspective. And obviously, if you're going to do it from a Tamas perspective, then you're going to get into ignorance. You're not going to get what you want to get. And finally, he tells us in verse number 18 that where are you going to be? Okay, that if you're going to get into knowledge, obviously your mindset is in that of a very higher plane. Because when you're operating with knowledge and wisdom, and it is your wisdom that is backing you, you're obviously operating from a much, much higher plane. Whereas when you're operating from a Rajas mindset, obviously you're going to be operating from greed, and therefore you're you're picking yourself down. And when you're operating from a Tamas perspective, you're obviously in a delusion or an ignorance because you're getting into inactivity, which is not helping you move towards your Swadharma. So the idea here is that we need to recognize the interplay of the gunas. We can all of this prevalent during one day in each of us. And we need to figure out what do we want to bring uppermost. Okay. Obviously, it is the Sattva guna that is very important. When you want to take a call, when you want to take a decision, you need to do it calmly. Because if you're going to do it from a Rajas perspective, then as he said very clearly, you're setting yourself up for some amount of pain that can accrue to you in your life. If we need to move to our Swadharma of creating that cocoon of happiness for ourselves and our families and for all around us, then obviously we need to keep this in mind as to which is the guna that is uppermost when we are taking that call, when we're taking that decision, because everything else will flow from that particular call that we actually are going to take. We move on to Arjuna. Obviously, Arjuna is going to ask a question, and he asks a very interesting question to Krishna in verse number 21. He says, okay, how do you go beyond this? And how do you recognize someone who is a gunatita? Okay, how do you recognize someone who's actually gone beyond all this? Now, here is something interesting that I'd like to share with you. Throughout various points, Arjuna keeps asking Krishna interesting questions. Okay, saying that, Krishna, you're telling me that I need to become somebody like this. So just to quickly recap, before we get into Krishna's answer to Arjuna, Arjuna keeps asking him, saying that, look, who is the ideal person? But he defines this ideal person in different words. And it's very interesting as you progress, you keep listening to these important, interesting aspects of what is the way that we need to lead our life, what is obviously an ideal person. In chapter 2, if you remember, he asks him, who is a Sthita Prajna? Okay, who is a Sthita Prajna? That is a man of equanimity, somebody who can handle opposites alike. Who is this Sthita Prajna? In chapter 5, he goes on to ask him, saying, who is this Jivan Mukta that you're talking about, Krishna? Who is this liberated one? And then in chapter 12, he talks about who is the Bhakta, the devotee. In chapter 14, he is talking about the Gunatita, which is someone who is able to understand the interplay of the gunas and is able to rise above that, adopting that mindset that will give him the enabling thoughts. Of course, in chapter 18, when we get there, we will understand about the Jnana Nishta, which means somebody who is absolutely steadfast in knowledge. But we pick up this action with verse 22, where Krishna is talking to us. Srini?
श्रीभगवानुवाच प्रकाशं च प्रवृत्तिं च मोहमेव च पाण्डव वेत्ति सम्प्रवृत्तानि न निवृत्तानि काङ्क्षति।
श्री भगवान बोले, हे पांडव, प्रकाश, प्रवृत्ति तथा मोह ये सभी अच्छी तरह से प्रवृत्त हो जाएं, तो भी गुणातीत मनुष्य इनसे द्वेष नहीं करता, और ये सभी निवृत्त हो जाए तो इनकी इच्छा नहीं करता।
Okay, so here is an important point. So how does a person transcend the gunas? He gives us two answers. Number one, he's already explained to us how are you going to how are you going to figure out the kind of guna that is uppermost. Okay, now when you're dealing with the rest of the world, you're going to be encountering somebody who's in a state of mind, but somebody else is in a rajata mind. Around. You're in a state of mind and somebody is in a sattva or a tamas, or when your tells you that you must clean the house or something like that, is you want to be in that complete infinity kind of a zone, and she wants you to be in that rajas state of mind. How are you going to handle that? Because obviously you're going to get extremely worried or angry. And he says, Gunatita is one who is able to transcend all this, handles this with equanimity. Absolutely no enmity when they are present or when they are absent. It doesn't matter, because he has understood that, look, it is these gunas that are at play. It is not the Jivatma, it is not the Paramatma within which is in it. It is actually the mindset that is helping you do this. So this is a beautiful system that has been given to all of us. That, look, if you were to come up against somebody like that, you are in one state of mind, somebody is in another state of mind, don't worry about it. He doesn't either hate it, he doesn't dislike it, he doesn't, he's not overly joyous about it, because he understands that where you're coming from is your mindset, and therefore that is that. So he is neither happy nor is he unhappy when he actually figures that these are present, they are absent. And then he talks about it in verse number 23, 24, and 25. He actually talks about one very interesting thing. He goes on to explain to us, saying that, look, you sit like a servant of circumstances. You're completely indifferent. You're not disturbed by the interplay of these gunas. So when you're up against someone, and when somebody is either confronting you or talking to you or telling you something, at that time, don't get too involved. He sits calmly. So the whole point is this, that he is advocating to us that, look, adopt this mindset where you can sit back and take a complete, don't get involved, because the other person's mindset may be one of these three, and doesn't matter. That is that person's mindset. You don't have to allow yourself to react basis the kind of input or basis the kind of stimulation that you're getting from the other person. You can do it in your own way. Okay. For some of us who understood this whole concept called transaction analysis, where you talk about the parent ego, the adult ego, and the child ego. And that entire theory is from here, in a way, that says that, look, when you are in a sattva region and somebody else is in a rajas or a tamas, how are you going to be interacting with that person? Likewise, if you are in a rajas situation and somebody else is in a sattva or a tamas, how are you reacting? And that is something which is very, very important. So he says he is alike to pain and pleasure. If you recall, in chapter 12 from 13 to 19, we did this entire thing about the interplay of the opposites. Looked at those 13 different kinds of opposites and how do you actually react to all of them. So he says to pain and pleasure, he is established in his own supreme self. And the fact is that he regards all alike, whether it is dirt, whether it is a stone, whether it is gold. If you recall, we did this also some time back. We said that, look, if it is mud, then it is very important to a potter. It's very important to a sculptor. If it is gold, then it's very important to a jeweler. Right? To us, it may not be important, but to each his own. Everybody will take whatever they want. And he says that, look, he is the same to opposites. Disagreeable, agreeable, all of these outcomes, people, okay, we need to recognize that when we are dealing with the outer world, it's the same. And he goes on to explain something very interesting. He says he is the same to honor or insult. Now, this is something which is very important for us to understand. He is the same to honor or insult. He is the same to friend or enemy. He renounces all attachment to the fruits of his action. That is the nature and quality of a Gunatita, of somebody who's been able to overcome all of this. Now, the point is this, that, when we are given some amount of honor, obviously you get very carried away by that. When you get an insult, you again get very carried away by that. But I think it's important to understand who is the person who's giving you this honor or who is the person who's insulting you in life. What is the importance of that person in your life? Okay, is he somebody who is helping you move towards your Swadharma or not? If he is not, then I would think it is better to choose to accept that honor or that insult with equanimity and not get carried away. And he says he continuously serves the Supreme Lord with devotion and bhakti. So he comes back again to this saying that the way to overcome all of this is to have that supreme devotion, that supreme faith, and then move beyond all these gunas and become one with the ultimate supreme soul that is there within each one of us. So he has laid out this very, very interesting part, and then he finally ends this chapter. Srini, verse number 27, please.
ब्रह्मणो हि प्रतिष्ठाहम् अमृतस्याव्ययस्य च शाश्वतस्य च धर्मस्य सुखस्यैकान्तिकस्य च।
क्योंकि मैं अमृत, अव्यय, ब्रह्म, शाश्वत, धर्म और एकांतिक अर्थात परमार्थिक सुख की प्रतिष्ठा हूं.
Okay, so he says, look, work to me with devotion. Why? Because I am the Supreme Lord, I am immortal, and that is where you will find the ultimate bliss. So serve me with devotion. And this is a very, very important, this is the end of this particular chapter, verse number 27. So let's get a couple of things in alignment here. You will get distracted from your Swadharma. When you're working on your path, when you're working on your higher purpose, you will get distracted. There is no doubt about that. Okay? But we need to recognize what is it that is making us derail from that purpose of our life. What is that guna that is uppermost at that point of time? And we need to work on achieving that higher purpose of our life and not allow ourselves to get derailed, not allow ourselves to move out from being focused on the action. Because that action and the outcome that is going to come from that particular action, that immediately need to start living the now. And that is a very, very important lesson that Arjuna teaches us in this entire chapter 14. So he teaches us a very important point that, look, the way of rising above all of this is to recognize that conditioning challenge that is coming in your way. And this conditioning is pushing you into that thought process. So your conditioning is either sattva or rajas or tamas, and it is this that is allowing you to get into a certain thought process, and therefore the actions that you take are going to be accordingly determined. Recognize this and figure out what is the action that you're doing right now, and therefore where do you want to come, and how can you align this particular action that you're doing with this inner divinity, with this supreme self that is sitting within you. That is a beautiful lesson that he gives us, to all of us. So to very quickly recap, he talks about, number one, that this is the wisdom. And what is that supreme wisdom? The fact that I am making sure that in every individual that is born in this world, there is this supreme divinity, and that each of you has that higher purpose. And when you're working on that higher purpose, remember this, and this is what we call the swadharma that you have. When you're working on that higher purpose, there are possibilities that you will encounter various situations in life. And when you do so, figure this out. Can you get that thought process which is going to give you enabling thoughts? Or are you getting a thought process that is pulling you down? Or are you getting a thought process that is pushing you into inactivity and not getting you to work on that? And likewise, when you're working on your swadharma, when you're going to interact with the rest of the world, you will have people who are interacting with you who are coming from their own mindset. Okay? Do you get carried away at that time? Or are you going to figure out a way of dealing with that person in a way that you will continue to work on your swadharma while you will carry that person? You don't hate the person, you don't dislike the person, you don't fall in love with that person. Both of this you handle with a lot of humility. That is Gunathita. That is his message through this beautiful chapter, chapter number 14. Om Tat Sat. We are now open to any questions, suggestions, any thoughts, any sharing. Love to do that.
Ram, hi. Looking at it from my office professionally, you spoke about how you want to receive the praise or the criticism, comments, appraisal that I'm having. I'm going to make sure that the person on the other end who is receiving a feedback, maybe it's in praise or maybe it's in criticism. Sometimes a criticism is also very, what can I say, beneficial to the person. How do I get the recipient in this frame of mind to be able to receive a feedback?
I mean, if you can, first of all, Jayashree, if we can change that word feedback to feed forward, I think everything changes.
Feed?
Feed forward.
Feed forward, okay.
Right? Everything changes in that simple word, right? I mean, yeah. No? And a postmortem is done on a dead body. It's about living people, about living organisms, right? Saying that, so how do you get this person to get into that feed forward pose? Where is this beautiful question you asked me? Where is the conflict that happened in appraisal, Jesh? Conflict happens because I think I'm 1, 2, 3. Whereas you are telling me that, no, I'm sorry, actually 4, 5, 6. Okay, and you are doing the appraisal, and that is where the conflict is actually happening, right? Now, this 1, 2, 3 that I'm presuming is coming from the past.
Yeah.
And your 4, 5, 6 is about the future, right? And therefore, can you do this appraisal with me, telling me that, look, I'm very happy that what you've done in the past, but look, we are now focusing on what you're going to be doing. Because the future means we need you to take so and so actions. And if you have to take these kinds of actions in your life, my friend, I want you to be receptive, because what I'm telling you now help you move into that area. So I'm being extremely critical. constructive. I'm criticizing you. I'm not trying to pull you down. I'm not trying to say that, okay, you've done these mistakes in life or you've done these great things in life. That's okay. Okay, what is done cannot be undone. But now can we move into a situation where you and I are going to sit down and say, my friend, here is something that I want you to do. This is something that is expected of you. Now let's figure out a way of how we can now move forward on that particular direction. Right? So you are now in a mindset that is coming from a sattva perspective, and you are enabling that person also to get into a sattva perspective. Okay? Because then what happens is that both of you can have a conversation on what needs to be done and what is the way forward. Okay? Because if we get into a feedback, no, Jayashree, I will always have my perspective, he will always have his perspective, and we both will never ever agree on what is right and what is wrong. Right? That's the point.
Okay, let's.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
So I want to know what is the recipe to develop more and more Sadgunas in you?
Ma'am, the one thing is to tell, be calm. You talk about the mind, and he says, how is it that is going to actually influence the mind? He says, be pure. And if you can anchor everything from that perspective in life, then you're doing extremely well. Okay? The minute you allow desire, the minute you allow attachment, the minute you allow inaction to come into your mind space, then obviously you are not going to get those enabling thoughts. See, ultimately, his message to us is very simple. That the kind of action that you need to take is going to be driven by your thought process. And your thought process is going to be driven by the conditioning that you have. Now, your conditioning could be from a purely sattva perspective or a rajas perspective or a tamas perspective. That is perfectly all right. There's nothing that we can do about our conditioning right now. We can't go and correct it. That is there. It's better to accept it, park it. But if we are going to consciously, and in each of us all three are available. And that's why he very clearly tells us, right? He talks about it in verse 10, saying that don't allow the other two gunas to overpower this sattva guna that is there within you, and therefore allow it to manifest itself more and more and more and more. Okay, so I'm a great believer, in doing a quick audit. Okay, of saying, okay, how many times did I lose my cool? How many times did I do something which was, with a hidden agenda? How many times did I not do what I'm supposed to be doing? And therefore, can I start recognizing that this is what is now more prevalent in my mind? And therefore, can I consciously do that thought override and start moving into a situation? Okay. And therefore, he tells us very clearly there are two things that you need to do. One, don't do things with any expectation of a fruit. Don't get attached to the fruits of your action. That is one way in which you can get sattva guna in you. Two, whatever you do it with a feeling of devotion. Do it with a certain feeling of bhakti. Do it saying that, I'm doing it for you. If you recall in the last chapter, he talked about the 5 ways that we can do it. That either you perform action from a knowledge and wisdom perspective, or forget it, you can't do that. Do it without getting attached to those fruits. Okay, you can't even do that. The feeling of bhakti with devotion, saying that I'm doing this. This is what is my inner calling, and this is what I want. The more we get those thoughts to the fore, ma'am, the more getting into that area of inculcating more and more and more enabling thoughts. Okay. And the more of those enabling thoughts that come within you, your family, your team, your employees, your vendors, your suppliers, or whatever, obviously you're going to now start laying the path for phenomenal growth. and you will grow. Okay? Because your outcomes are going to be so much better. And once you get better and better and better outcomes, obviously the fruits that you're going to get are going to be that much better in life. Any other thought, any other
Ram, I have a
observation?
question.
Please go ahead.
I mean, after going through this entire, this is confusion. You say that there are so it is important for us to be in a state where the sattva guna is more predominant, or be in a all three are equally balanced.
Rajiv, the point is that, in that transaction that you're going to get into, Rajiv, it is important to realize which is important at this point of time. Okay? If you want to take a decision, Rajiv, if you want to say a partner in, I need to merge my company. I need to acquire another company. I need an employee. Right? Now, what time you need to sit down, calmly think, take a call. Right? That is the time when you need to get that guna uppermost. Supposing, for instance, you are in the mode of getting things done. You're getting into one huge delivery, or you're getting into one massive completion, or you're doing some project is getting to be delivered. Obviously, at that time, it is that activity that is most important, right? So you've thought this through, and then you're going to get into that activity. Okay? And then supposing, God forbid, you find someone who's critical or who's criticizing or whatever it is. That is when you again go back to being quiet. Okay? One thing that he very clearly tells us is that don't get into that, because that leads to inactivity, that is ignorance. But then you have to do this delicate balance between sattva and rajas at any point of time. So when you're taking a call, obviously be calm. No, don't do it. When you take a call on the fly, there are chances that it may not go the way you want it to go. And if you're taking a call saying that, I am doing this because this is what is going to happen, and if it is one of those instant calls, you're setting yourself up. It may go right, nothing wrong. If it doesn't, then you're setting yourself up for some amount of pain and grief. Keep that in mind. Okay? It's not that every call that you take can be done only with this. Just keep this in mind. That's the point that he's trying to tell us. That anything to do with decision making, anything to do with moving ahead, be calm, be cool, take that decision from that perspective. That's his message to us. But recognize that all three will be prevalent in the day. All three will be operating within you, because we are all creations of all three conditioning in us, Rajiv. Now, when you need to take a call, if you're going to get into inactivity, then that's disastrous, isn't it? Keep that in mind.
But then, Ram, in one of the verses which you explained, he very clearly states that if you live your life with your sattva guna being totally in that pious state and pious state, then you will definitely attain the there will be no rebirth. But if you have the other gunas, accordingly you will sit down and have your thing.
Yes.
So if I have a balance of all three, or we sit down as a human beings, if try to balance all three, then there is a little bit of contradiction there, right?
No, not at all, Rajiv. You see, I'll tell you why there's no contradiction. The point is that recognize that all three exist in you first. Okay? Figure out a way of going above it. See, whenever this whole concept of death and rebirth and things like that, okay? What is he trying to do? He's trying to re-emphasize that point to Arjuna at that time, and to Arjuna to us, saying that, boss, adopt this, yeah, that's a good state of mind to be. If you do it, then you will get what you want in your life. So it's that he is giving, saying that, look, if you were not to do that, then there is this that will happen, or this will happen. Okay? So he's very clearly trying to explain to us, saying that, look, recognize that these three are there in you. Okay. Obviously, a calm, cool mind rise to those of thoughts. Those of thoughts are going to enable the kind of results that you want. That there is no doubt about. Okay. So that is his main point to all of us, saying that, look, when you're living, live in a way, live like this. Okay? And he is educating us, saying that these are the kind of results that you will get if you were to adopt any of these three paths in your life.
See, one of the things is when you talked about recipe for your three gunas, one of the things that at least I'm trying to do over the last 8, I've gone back in life over all the major decisions or major happened in my life. At that point in time, what did I do and in what state I was when I did that? Some things went right, some things went wrong, some things didn't happen. By doing that, what's happening is now I'm getting out the feeling of angst that I have, or that feeling of regret that I had, or the anger that I had, and I'm coming back into a much more calmer state in my life today. At the end of the day, I've reached a state in life where I feel that what I have to do next has to be more towards. So if you can actually sit and instead of daily audit that Ram talks about, if you can take the next couple of weeks and go back in your lifetime and take a call that I did this out of a choice, and when I made that choice, what state I was in. I think, at least for me, there was a lot in what I did and why I did.
I'd like to specify to all of you. We've done what we've done in life here. It's over. You know, what we've done, we've done. You can't go back and do anything about what you've done. You can go back and apologize to someone, anything like that. Okay, if you've been unfair to someone, maybe yes, you can go back and apologize or something. If you can do correction, fine. I mean, you can do some correction. But I think it's more important to figure out how to move to the future. You know, don't worry about what has happened till now. I think it's important to say, where do we go from here? And that is the greatest message that the Gita gives us. That, you know, you've come from wherever you come in your life. It doesn't matter. Okay? If there is a correction, if you need to go and apologize to somebody, please go do that. That's a great thing, fantastic thing. Like and I'm delighted. So many of you sent me. I'm really humbled. All the personal messages that I got yesterday from so many of you. I'm truly grateful. But even the power of apology is a very strong one. You know that it doesn't matter if I've been unfair to someone. I will apologize to that person, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, if he accepts it. He doesn't. But I've got it off my chest. Okay? That's something which is very important. I've done it. I'm clear. I have now found peace with myself. Okay? The other accepts my apology. Fantastic. Accept my apology. You know, I can still only feel that, look, I'm sorry. But I think the important thing is this, that how are we going to use this to go forward? That's the important point. You know? So if you can figure this out and say that, you know, here is a beautiful analysis that he has given us. Here is a beautiful way that he has given us, you know, on what is the nature, what is the source, what is the kind of attachment that, how does this manifest itself? How does the mind interact with all of these? You know, what are the kind of results that you can get when these gunas are open, or what is the mindset that happens? So what he is doing is that he is clearly giving us a very, very well-defined path, saying, this is a beautiful path that I'm laying out for you. Be aware of it, and then try and adopt a mindset enabling that will help you get on with your dharma, which is your higher purpose in life. Adopt that particular mindset. That is his whole exhortation to us. Recognize, adopt that mindset, and keep moving ahead in that particular direction of self. I think that is the lesson that he's sharing with each one of us through this, right? Don't worry about what has happened in the past. That's perfectly all right. Don't worry about what is going to happen in the future. Leave it to him. You worry about today, and you worry about saying, okay, today I'm going to be interacting with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Today I'm going to be taking these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decisions. Today I'm going to be doing this. And therefore, let me live today. Let me live in the now. Don't worry about tomorrow. Leave that. Don't worry about the past. Leave that, because there's nothing you can do about it. There is this huge thought. It says Chinta and Shoka. Chinta of the future, Shoka of the past. Both are not in your hand. Okay? Because Chinta and Shoka of the past, okay, Chinta of the future, both are not in your hands. Leave both. Focus on the now. Try and find Sukha at this point of time in what you're doing. Don't worry about what will happen tomorrow. We'll take care of it when we come to that. There's another beautiful learning in the Gita. This interplay of the gunas, what it also does to us is that we've got into one more conditioning challenge in life, if you ask me. And that is, we start building bridges where rivers don't even exist. We build bridges where it doesn't even exist. There's no river. The river is only in your mind. And you're already building a bridge on that river. What if I were to do this, and what if that were to happen? What can be done? But there is no river at all, no? So you are building in your mind on a presumed that you may come across at some point of time in the future. And in the process of doing all of that, you're only adding to anxiety, adding to your stress, and you're not living in the now. Okay? What if we can actually adopt a process of living in the now? And when that bridge comes, when that river comes, have the confidence that you will build that bridge. Okay? Should that river happen in your life, develop that confidence that your actions of now will help you build that bridge when you come across that river. Have that faith, have that bhakti, have that devotion that it will happen, that you can build that bridge as and when that bridge needs to be built. But don't waste your time building a bridge on a river that may or may not exist. Okay? That's his lesson to all of us.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, sir. Sankal this side. Can I ask one question? Rather, it's more of an analysis than leading to a query, actually.
Please go ahead.
Sir, as I understand throughout this chapter that these three gunas, what we call Raj, Tamas, and Satgun, they are actually evolving at the soul level or at the Kshetragya level, what we call, not at the Kshetra level. Maybe through the Indriyas we have a reflection on the body, that is the Kshetra or Deha, what we call. My query is that I've read that there is an ancient saying that yatha an tatha man, so which means the way you eat, your feelings or your body will react the same, or your gunas will be developed according to how you eat and what you eat. But in this chapter we are saying that the evolution of the gunas is at the soul level. So how true is that? Whether a food or what we intake to our body is actually matters to it in terms of developing these gunas.
Uncle, just a quick one. The gunas are actually from Prakriti, nature. Okay? So the gunas are actually from Prakriti and nature. But what happens is that when you are born with this supreme divinity within you, which is what he tells us through this entire first 5 verses of his, he says it is.
मेरा friend मनीष कह रहा है कि उसने appoint कर दिया है.
Srini?
Ram, I've muted. Please continue.
Okay. So, so Sankalp, one important point, you know, that these gunas are actually the imbalance in nature. Okay, that is how these gunas. So these gunas exist. Okay, that is number one. Keep that in mind. The second point is this, that when the gunas are there, it is important for us to recognize that it is these gunas that are doing the integrate. It is these gunas that are allowing your mind to get, you know, it is part of your conditioning. And therefore, what is happening because of that conditioning is that that is the kind of thought process that you are getting into because of these gunas and because of the conditioning that you've been through in life. You understand?
Yeah.
So, obviously, because of the fact that these gunas are there, you are getting into a certain kind of a thought process in your life. Okay?
Right.
Now, you have to recognize, are these enabling, are these not enabling? That's the only point that he's making us aware of. Saying that, look, here is a beautiful formula that I've given you. Okay? If the thought process that you've got is a pure enabling thought process, then recognize that it is coming from a sattva. If it is coming from a desire, greed perspective, then remember that it is coming from that rajas conditioning of yours. If it is coming from a procrastination, inactivity, not doing anything, then remember that it is coming from your tamas conditioning.
Right.
Just recognize that. Okay. So you're right. The way you eat, the way you eat, you know, is actually a little larger perspective. It's not the food that you eat. Okay. Because what you consume is at the body level, is at the mind level, and is at the soul level.
Yeah, exactly.
So you actually are going, it depends on what you are consuming at all the 3 levels.
Okay.
So when that statement actually is, you know, you are what you, actually it means what consuming, you know. So it goes on to explain, I think in chapter 17, that, you know, the kind of food that you eat will also be determinant. What he's actually trying to tell us is this, that what you consume physically, mentally, spiritually is what will determine your thought process, and that thought process will then get you into the mode of action and will obviously give you the kind of results that you need. So recognize that. So he's given us a very, very interesting, which is what a Srini and other Jayashree and others would be very comfortable with, or even a Rahul would be comfortable with. They turn around and say, give me a template, right? Or even Sanjay Kanakia, my good friend.
That's
Give me
fantastic.
a template for us
That's
to.
amazing. That's amazing. Really amazing. It's that, you know, what gun of yours or of nature.
I'll tell you a simple example. Supposing I'll text you I'll send you my address, I'll send you my location or whatever, landed at home. And I call you. And I say, hey, Sankalp, where are you here? I'm concerned. Which part of yours is uppermost at that? What do you mean? You mean I can't even find your place? What are you talking?
Yeah.
Okay. You just cut off my call saying, fellow, you mean you think that I can't reach his house? Or you pick up the call, you say, yeah, Ram, I'm on my way there, but, you know, I'm right now at this particular cross, or I'm, you know, at this particular junction or something like that. And, you know, I say, great, it'll take you another 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes to reach here, you know, do this. So your reaction is entirely, you know, It's such a simple thing, isn't it? And we get sometimes so carried away.
Yeah, so I mean,
So it depends on where you're coming
right,
from.
right. So I generally believe this, that generally, people say that every action has a reaction, but most of the time these reactions are actually independent of action, because these reactions are predominantly driven through the perception or the of the reaction.
And if I ask you that question, your reaction is one. Okay? If your father asks you that question, there's one. If your mother asks you that question, it's another one.
Right.
If your wife asks you the same question, it's another one. If your daughter asks, this is the beauty, right?
Right. It's amazing.
That our response also changes, because that is again part of our conditioning.
So Ram, what is the right, what should have been the right answer in this situation? It's a foolish question, but I'm asking.
No, absolutely. No. So if I were to ask you saying, where are you? I mean, right? The answer is obviously saying that, I'm getting there. I'll be there in another 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes. I'm at this junction. I'm at this place. That's it.
Yeah, so it should be unbiased. The response should be unbiased, independent of whosoever is asking this.
Even if my perspective, I know you are one lazy fellow. I know you are doing this deliberately to make me wait. Even if I'm coming from that perspective, which is his whole point, saying that, look, when you are interacting with somebody in the world, okay, even if I'm coming from that perspective, okay, you don't have to modify your answer depending upon where you think I'm coming from or where you know I'm coming from. Even if you know where I'm coming from, you don't have to modify your answer. You can continue to give me the answer that makes sense to you.
Right, right. Sthit pragya. Yeah.
Don't worry. No, I mean, I may be coming. That's exactly his point. He very clearly explained this to us, saying that, look, you will meet all kinds of people in this world. You'll meet all kinds of people in this journey. You don't have to change your response. This is what somebody else is, going to do, right? That's what he explains in verse 22 when he says that, look, all right, I'm here.
But you're absolutely right, Ram. How you answer that, if your wife asks you, your answer will be different, or your friend asks you. We are all like that. To our outsiders, we'll answer very politely, and to people at home, "Arey, aapko pata nahi hai? Main aa raha hu." So I mean, this is very natural. But what you're pointing out is that we should at all times be.
No, ma'am. What I'm saying, Renu, is that recognize that this is part of that conditioning that is giving you that response. Work on that and figure out, look, is this something that we can work with, or is this something that we don't want to work with? It's as simple as that, right? If my wife calls me and finds out where am I right now, and if I were to, for whatever reason, if I were to give her an inappropriate answer, and then I get home in 5 minutes, and there's complete unhappiness at home, and it's going to take me a whole evening of trying to figure out how to get out of that situation. So, so at that point of time, what is it that is enabling that kind of an answer? I think is it important.
Ram,
That's what I meant by saying, do this audit and figure out what have you done. Yes, Sanjay, please go ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, introduce to you Sanjay Kanakia. Sanjay is a phenomenal life coach. Yes, Sanjay.
No, if one of the right answers for that question, where are you, would be just answer what Krishna would say is, I am here. That's it. And you may understand whatever you understand out of it. But anyway, I had a question.
Wife will not understand that.
Doesn't matter. That's the wife's reaction. I am here.
Right, Sanjay, go ahead. Very good.
Ram, what I'm getting out of this chapter that you're talking about is sattva, rajas, tamas, and then you talk about the gunatitha that Krishna talks about, right? I am kind of coming to an understanding that the gunatitha is what you are actually trying to propagate, or what you would say is that something that you're trying to be, because he's trying to give you the different gunas, that is sattva, rajas, tamas, and he also talks about, if one is acting up, the other two will not tap, and you need to balance the three, right? So if you look at it from perspective that, okay, get out of tamas so that you get out of inaction, get out of rajas so that you get out of greed, and get out of sattva as well so that you're not linking it to your happiness, and you come to that point where you do your action without any kind of desire or anything, or of happiness itself. And that's what is leading to the gunatitha kind of concept that he's talking about. Is that also one of the interpretations?
Yes, you're absolutely right, Sanjay. That is a very, very important interpretation. But then, I think the point is that, the gunatitha is one who can transcend all the gunas. Okay? But can we reach it? I honestly think it's a very difficult path, Sanjay. I mean, we can do it. If we can get there, it's great. But then remember one very important thing that he says, that all the three gunas will bind you to some attachment. Okay? Whether it is happiness, whether it is pleasure, whether it is, greed, whether it is anger, whether it is laziness, all of them will bind us. But if you can move into that situation, and then he tells, how do you move into that situation? Quite honestly, how do you sit as a servant of circumstances? How do you adopt that whole, attitude of being indifferent to the play of opposites? Okay? That is what he's advising us, saying that can you actually get to that particular level? If you can, great. It'll be fantastic if you can actually get to that state. But at this point of time on the journey, I think it's important to recognize that all these three will be there in us. And how do you recognize what is uppermost at this point of time? Start working on that. Obviously, to move into a sattva kind of a stage is a desirable stage. So move to that stage. And then over a period of time, if you can even transcend that, then you truly, truly, truly become a completely evolved human being. Okay? That is his message to all of us, saying that, look, at least recognize this interplay and then keep moving on from here.
Correct. That's the process of evolution that he's talking about. So you recognize what is the current state, your conditioning, all, as you said, the three conditionings that are there, and recognize that the conditioning is there, and therefore our process of evolution is to actually overcome all three. How difficult or not, we don't know. But the question is, that is the process.
And that's what he ends the chapter by saying that, look, so long as you are absolutely devoted to me, then you will get into that process of evolution. Okay, that's his whole thought.
Yeah, thanks.
Ram, can we believe that the three gunas, what you have described today, are they like a vehicle to do your sadharma, to understand that, and then to raise your level, and then ultimately you carry out your sadharma, and ultimately you meet the final goal of recognizing the Brahma within you. Is it the purpose of this, the knowing three gunas?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, saying that, look, this is a way of rising above the conditioning challenges that each of us have when we are working on our path of Swadharma. Okay? And one very important thing is that when you are working on your path of your Swadharma, obviously then at that time, there will be certain derailments that will happen. There will be certain obstacles that will come. There will be certain opposition that will happen. There is no doubt about that. And when that happens, how do we recognize that it is this interplay that is causing one of those challenges, either a derailment or an obstacle or an opposition. And therefore, how are you going to overcome this? Here is a path that he has laid out to us, saying that it is your conditioning challenge that will determine your response, okay, to a certain situation, or it is your conditioning that will determine your reaction to a situation. So obviously, one of the things that he wants us to do is to move away from reacting to responding. Okay? That if you can buy that time and not react but respond to what is happening to you, whether it is a derailment or an obstacle or an opposition that happens your way, can you respond? And how do you respond? He's clearly told us that adopt this sattva state of mind, which is calm, collected, and then your response is that much more measured. Okay, if you were to react, then obviously you're reacting either from a rajas perspective or from a tamas perspective to any of these three things that may happen to you, and that's his whole point.
Yeah, because if we read Satyena Prayoga by Mahatma Gandhi ji, the experiment in truth, in that I understand, that he moves from tamas to rajas and then to sattva. That is what I have understood. Am I right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So, these are very evolved souls, but it took time to reach that particular level of evolution, and therefore this is a journey that we have to undertake. This is a journey that we have to move on, and this is the journey that we've consciously adopted.
Ram,
thank you.
Ram,
thank you very much, Ram.
Yes, please.
Yes, Shini. I think many a times we are not only attached or trying to manage the outcome or result of our actions. I think we are also stuck with trying to manage the reaction of the process or the people involved in it. And sometimes just managing reaction actually overtakes everything else. And how do you see these two things? You actually mentioned a beautiful thing that we create bridges where there are no rivers. I think in this whole thing of managing the reaction of people, and today if you see, there is a beautiful spectrum of discussion we had from from feedback to what my wife says or spouse says where I am. So we are actually talking about, regardless of who is there in the relation or equation in that conversation or action, we are perhaps more concerned about reaction than outcome or both. And in the process, perhaps our own work may get impacted, or what we are doing may get impacted.
100%. Take a look at the current IPL that is being played. Okay? So look at what is happening in the IPL. So there is this young Indian talent, whether it is a bowler or a batsman. Okay? Now these are people who have been playing at the state level. And they are now up against certain international players. The best of the best. Steve Smith, Dave Warner, right? Or the best of the best are playing them. So if you're a bowler, then you're bowling against some of the best batsmen in the world. Okay? If you're a batsman, then you're being bowled against by some of the best bowlers in the world. Jofra Archer. I mean, these guys are right up there. Okay? What do you think our young bowlers or young batsmen should do? These are 21, 22, 23, 24 years old. Should they get completely overawed by the fact that Jofra Archer is coming to bowl to me? Or Kagiso Rabada is coming to bowl to me? Okay? Or Dale Steyn is coming to bowl to me, and look at the history of this guy? Or should a batsman think, or should a bowler think that, oh my God, I'm bowling to the famous Steve Smith, I'm bowling to David Warner. These guys can take me apart. I'm bowling to A.B. de Villiers. These guys can just take me apart. Forget the foreigners. I'm bowling to Rohit Sharma. I'm bowling to Virat Kohli. I'm bowling to, Shikhar Dhawan. I'm bowling to the best of the best. So should you focus on your game, or should you try and bowl being conscious of what the other guy is doing? Obviously, if you're going to be focused on your game, and you're seeing this in the IPL today, if Tewatia or Padikkal or whatever it is who are scoring runs profusely are not getting overawed by the opposition. Okay? They are going and playing their game because that is what is their swadharma. So even coming down to a family or a corporate life or whatever it is, I think we waste far too much of time trying to second guess the opposition, trying to second guess what is the reaction, and then modifying our entire thought process, So I'm now going to say something by which I need to please Srini is more important than saying what I want to say. Okay? So does it mean that you go and hurt people? No, don't. Don't hurt people. Don't do that. That is not what is called for in life, right? But at the same time, don't over excessively overthink and waste time on on a whole host of these on these imaginary reactions that you will get. Many years ago, Srini, I used to work in Mumbai, and one of our clients was the Reserve Bank of India. Okay? And we used to deal with the governor of the Reserve Bank of India, and every time I went into the Reserve Bank, in the head office, the only thought that used to be in my mind, Srini, uppermost, was that I came 2 times for an interview and got rejected here. I went to, I sat for something called a B grade officer's exam, and then I sat for an A grade officer's exam, and then, I did something and I got through something, and then I went there and I flunked the interview. Yes. And I'm dealing with these guys there. So till one day I finally told one of them, I still remember this deputy governor, lovely gentleman, Bengali gentleman. Sir, ऐसा ऐसा हुआ था हमारे साथ. He said, अच्छा हुआ ना? What do you mean अच्छा हुआ ना? He said, हाँ, अच्छा हुआ. अगर तुम अभी बैंक में काम करता था, तुम हमको ये सब बोलता. And then he calculated. He said, when did you sit for the exam? 1982. अगर 82 ना, today 96. अभी आप 14 साल 15 साल के बाद you would have been in this position, you would have not met me at all. What a change of perspective. And then he turned around and he said, boss, the fact that you are coming in telling us कि हम लोग ये गलत कर रहा है और हमको ऐसा करना चाहिए, हमारा इश्तिहार ऐसा होना चाहिए, I'm so grateful that you didn't get through. And that changed my mind. I said, क्या बात है, Imagine if I was working there, I would have been, okay, today I may have ended up as one of the deputy governors or the governor, I don't know. But then that's different. So what I'm saying is that don't worry about that reaction. You do what you think is the right thing to do, but you don't have to be offensive. And I think in the next chapter, when we're going to meet on chapter 15, we're going to be talking about the Purushottama Yoga. That is, we keep talking about the about the Supreme Self. Okay, so how does this Supreme Self manifest himself? So next chapter is again a very, very interesting. Actually, 15, 16, 17, 18 are all very, very interesting chapters. So we will meet on Monday. We take a tabling break on Sunday. Respecting all our tabler friends, and okay, we'll end today with a prayer. Om Tat Sat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Ram.
much.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Srini.